Hello, and welcome to Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship of North Carolina's live stream event on November 5th, 2020. We are an organization that has met in person once a month, more or less, for the past 47 years to sponsor a speaker. This virtual platform has opened up a lot of possibilities for us to expand our audience, and we are so excited about this. My name is Susan Hunter, and I am the chairperson and program coordinator for SFF. Our mission is to enhance the spiritual, mystical, and metaphysical awareness and consciousness of our community by sponsoring programs that facilitate personal spiritual growth, development, and holistic approach to health and living. SFF, though, is not affiliated with any religious organization, but we do meet at Unity Church of the Triangle, which we're very thankful for. So Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship is a nonprofit, volunteer-run organization, and the only way we exist is through your generous donations. We are very active on social media, so check out our YouTube, Meetup, Facebook, and Instagram pages. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe. Our website is spiritual-frontiers.com, where you can make your donations. If you want to receive our e-flyer to remind you of our events, you can sign up for that as well on our website. Oh, and by the way, if you want to help our organization, we would love to talk to you about joining our board of directors. We need help specifically with our social media presence. So if you have experience of posting online, there may be a job for you. Training will be included. So please consider talking to me about this or one of our board members about this opportunity. There is another role of program coordinator that needs filling that takes a little more time than the social media coordinator. Training is included. And again, contact me, Susan Hunter, at chairperson@spiritual-frontiers.com, or go to our website and find another board member to email. With all of our lectures, as with any information that you receive, we ask that you use your own discernment to find the truth that resonates for you. So, I'm going to now announce the upcoming events. On Thursday, December 5th, we will have Marcia Moon Hebrank of Durham, North Carolina, and she will speak on Opening to Grace, Discovering and Embracing Your Divine Gifts with the Help of the Angels. So, Moon is an angelic messenger, spiritual teacher, and healing facilitator, and she will join us for an evening of exploration, healing, and discovery as she invites the celestial beings known as the angels to assist us in stepping forward fearlessly into an inspired, meaningful life of growth, promise, illumination, and joy. Now, this will be an experiential event as well in December. She will, through a guided angelic healing meditation, she will invite each of our angels and spirit guardians formally into our lives to provide us with wisdom, healing, and release that which is no longer serves our highest good. Moon will also share direct channeled guidance she has received from the divine and the angels about living a spirit-filled life in these times of change and awakening. So you might want to take notes on that one. Thursday, January 7th, 2021, we're already there, Catherine Zola Allen will talk about astrological aspects for 2021 and using astrology to empower your life. Now, Catherine comes highly recommended by Philip Young, who is a popular SFF speaker and master astrologer in our area. Catherine has lived in many parts of California most of her life and has traveled the world. She moved to North Durham from California a year ago after receiving intuitive guidance to do so. So we are very happy to introduce her to our community here. Moving on to February, Thursday, February 4th, 2021, Suzette Faith Foster will speak to us about navigating these unique times while awakening from separation and suffering. Suzette used to live in Cary for many years and is now living in Boone and has an international virtual healing and coaching practice. She was also a member of Board of Directors of Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship for a few years as well. So this is a quote from her book talking about her experience in 2005. In 2005, I sustained the same kind of severe spinal injury as the late Christopher Reeve. Like Reeve, I was totally paralyzed and stopped breathing. Without immediate EMS support, my doctor said I should have died immediately. Then, after surgery, he expected me to remain a quadriplegic. I credit being alive and fully functioning to my consistent practice and belief in powerful healing capacity of the mind, body, and spirit principles. Now, Suzette's book gives more information about her experiences and practices, and the book is named Calling Back Your Power. I highly recommend that. There's going to be more information on our website, so you're welcome to look at that as well as they come up. So SFF would like to thank Unity of the Triangle for helping us with this unique presentation, and Sagewood Healing Center in Raleigh for their support for our broadcasts. So before I introduce Garth, I want to ask you a question. Did you notice there was no fee for tonight's event? Well, we are asking that if you find this meeting has value to you, to please make a donation on our website at spiritual-frontiers.com. SFF would like to continue our work for our metaphysical community, and we welcome your financial support. So there will be a short break about halfway through Garth's presentation, and the second half will be more experiential with the instruments, and so you may want to get comfortable or lie down to receive the healing frequencies that he's going to share with us. Near the end, we may have a short pause before we will have a live questions and answer session with Garth, about the last 10-15 minutes of our event. And at that time, we will use the chat box only to allow you to submit questions. And everyone will be muted, and the chat box will not be on until the Q&A session. So I thank you very much for coming tonight, and especially the new people who are joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce Garth Robertson of Pittsburgh, North Carolina. So, born in Sanford, Florida, Garth moved to North Carolina in 1996. There was not a lot to do there except look at farms and tobacco fields, so he asked his grandpa for a guitar, and that's when it all began. So Garth played the guitar in a rock and roll band that traveled throughout the U.S. with the same band for 10 years. But he did want to make sure y'all knew that they all had day jobs too. Now he makes healing albums with his wife, and she is the poet, and who writes the lyrics, and he writes the music. He has a healing practice and studio near Pittsburgh. Garth has been making music and using sound as a modality for self-healing for more than 20 years. Throughout his journey, he has received the message that sound can be used for physical, mental, and spiritual healing. He says, quote, "Song can do more than excite the nervous system with danceable energy or help you revisit a cherished memory. It can be used to help move energy through the body and alleviate stagnation and blockage." In 2015, he took a meditative trip to Peru, which solidified his decision to step out into sound healing path, and has been going back every year. And he'll talk more about that in just a minute. He had plenty of time to sit with his thoughts in the jungle, and they always came back to his offering this service. During that time, he was able to observe and learn from a strong lineage of curanderos, or native shamans, who heal with sound. So it's my pleasure to introduce Garth Robertson to the stage. Thank you so much.
So, hello everyone. I'd like to take a moment and just thank Spiritual Frontier Fellowship for having me out here, and also to thank Susan. She actually invited me to be to lead the meditation a few months ago. Well, a lot more than that now. And so it's really awesome to be back here presenting about something that I'm so passionate about, which is healing with sound. So a lot of times when I tell people what I do, the first question that I get is, what is sound healing? Next slide, please. And I have a personal definition that I like to use. Next slide. And that sound healing is us healing ourselves. Sound healing works like hand in hand with our body's innate ability to heal itself. You're going to hear me say that a few times during this talk, our body's innate ability to heal itself. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, we actually have proof every day of this regeneration that our body does. If you get a cut over a few days, you'll notice that it regenerates and closes. And so using that across the whole mind, body, and spirit, the body can regenerate. The spirit can regenerate. The mind can regenerate. And so using sound, well, the frequency and vibration, to relax the body and mind, which is more of a textbook definition of sound healing, we can reach these different spaces to actually cue the body into this regeneration without ever being asleep, which is where it normally happens. Next slide, please. So a typical sound session usually they're done in groups, but they can also be done one-on-one. Recently, it's been a lot more one-on-one, not so many groups. But when it was groups, and even when it's one-on-one, it's people laying down with their eyes closed, maybe in a very comfortable, restorative position with like knee bolsters and having everything supported. And usually, depending on the facilitator or the sound healer that you're working with, taken on a journey through sound, much like I brought some instruments today. So for most, it can be just one. Like some people will just have a gong bath, for instance, or some people just have crystal bowls. But for a lot of people, it is many instruments, and it's kind of like a journey through them. The energy of the practitioner also affects it a lot, meaning that you could have the same set of crystal bowls, and different people could play on the same set, and you would have a totally different experience. Of course, the energy from the person goes into the experience as well across the board, so sound healing is no different. But I do have some good news for you, though. Next slide, please. There's a good chance you've already experienced sound healing, even if you've never been to a group session or a one-on-one session. Have you ever listened to a song, maybe from your childhood, or that was attached to an amazing time in your life, or maybe it just is a profound lyric with a perfect chord at the perfect moment, and you get these goosebumps. You get this tingly, for me, it goes up my spine, it comes across my head, and it's a tingly sensation. Mood elevation, that can come along with this. Maybe if it's a sad song, even going back to some of those emotions, a sadder time in your life. But you're being affected by the music and by the sound. And it was this that kind of, along with what Susan had mentioned, it was this that brought me to the work all those years ago. Because when I used to play in restaurants and bars, acoustic guitar and singing, I would notice that people would come in, maybe it'd be a Friday afternoon, and they would be, carrying the week with them, maybe not so happy, not so lively, just happy to be done with the week. And I would be over there playing in the corner, and maybe after a couple of beers, they'd come and say, request a song. Hey, do you know this song? And if I happened to know it, I would play it for them. And in those next moments, you would see everything change in them. You would see their energy increase. You would see their eyes brighten. Whatever they were worried about is gone. Whatever they were anxious about, it seems gone. They're here in the present moment singing this song with me, and everything seems okay. Seeing this over and over with people kind of led me to believe, well, what if we took this sound and focused it down into like a laser. One frequency, one intention. What can we affect going at it from that way? And that's kind of what brought me to this and made me kind of start thinking, well, maybe this would be something that I could offer. And then as Susan mentioned in the introduction, I took a trip down to Peru to kind of reset, and you're in the jungle there, you're far away from any Wi-Fi or electrical grid, running water, you are just one with nature, and you stay there. There are no lights, no electricity, no nothing. So you just kind of exist there with nature, and it really is a full body reset. Your circadian rhythm comes back naturally. A lot of things, obviously you're eating a lot more healthy, so you're detoxifying. It's an incredible experience and why I go back every year. And of course it was also there that I got the further nudge to move into this work. So say you come to a session, next slide please. What can sound help, or what can you expect maybe to feel as you are, walking away from the experience? A lot of my clients have had they've lowered their stress levels, they've leveled out their mood swings, their blood pressure has also gone down, cholesterol has also gone down, which I believe this may have something to do with the stress going down. People that were having issues sleeping were able to rest through the night fully. Anxiety and depression were both decreased. And I even had a couple clients who, and I'll talk about this a little more in a moment, but were able to get to these deeper places in their self where they were able to work on the traumatic experience that's causing their PTSD. And they were able to work on it from a place that didn't trigger them as they were thinking about it. So they were able to actually kind of work more through it. And so it kind of lessened the PTSD for them from that point on. Didn't cure it, but it was definitely a noticeable effect. And there's a lot more that can happen than just what's on this list. And something I want to say is not everyone is going to experience everything on this list. Some people might come in because they're having problems sleeping, and they may still have problems sleeping when they walk away from it, but maybe some other healing happened that they weren't expecting or even, planning on. Next slide, please. And now's a good time to kind of stop and talk about magic, because I could probably do a talk on sound healing twice as long if I was talking about the magical aspects of it and the incredible things that I've seen in my travels with it only. And there are always going to be things that science cannot explain no matter what. And sound healing has many of those within the modality. Because it's not always the same for each person, and there's even no way to really tell what it's going to be. We just have to honor the fact that there is a magical component to it. Next slide, please. And so before we talk about the actual science, let's do a little bit of history, and we'll talk about how a lot of these instruments have moved through history. And it's really funny, and I actually didn't put this together until I was putting this talk together. A lot of the instruments that were first created in the world are the same instruments that I brought with me today, are the same instruments that, some of these 40,000 years old, 60,000 years old. They were like the first ones, and they're still being used in this healing way. And so when that dawned on me, it was kind of like an aha moment of like, wow, originally they were correct. Next slide, please. He who knows the secret of sound knows the mystery of the whole universe. Hazrat Inayat Khan, he was the founder of the Sufi order of the West. The secret and the mystery of the whole universe seems like a really big thing, but just to show you what they were kind of thinking as far as sound is so connected to the mystery of the universe. Some people say that sound was the first thing. First there was the word, right? And so it's something to move, to think about as we go through this today. Next slide, please. So music existed long before humans, right? Think of it. The wind blowing through the trees, the rhythm of the undulating grasses, bird song. Let's take a second and think about bird song, because it's always just morning somewhere. So right now in this moment, whenever you're watching this, bird song is happening. There are animals celebrating the coming of the new day constantly. It's like a wave that's moving across the surface of the planet, constantly happening. And I don't know, when that came into my mind, it just made me kind of smile that, there's always a rejoicing for the brand new day. It's always happening in this moment somewhere on the planet. So say back to this, if you're walking, leaves under your feet. I know I've been walking outside in the fall and kind of gotten into this rhythm where I was hearing it and being one with it. As a joke, the Brownian motion of cytoplasm and protoplasm billions of years ago could have been music. Who knows? We weren't there to hear it. But most of these came from humans being outside and being connected. So when we did arrive on the scene and we were able to hear these amazing sounds that just made up our normal soundscape day-to-day living, these were likely desirable and appealing sounds, and they actually serve a purpose, which we'll get into a little later. But just being around all of these varying sounds in three-dimensional space actually has benefits to your brain, which is kind of cool. So let's move over to some of these ancient cultures. Let's go to Australia. Next slide, please. Cave paintings dating from over 40,000 years ago depict people playing didgeridoos. And in some paintings, it even has people laying at the feet of the person playing the didgeridoo and the person playing the didgeridoo over top of them, which is a very common way, not so much nowadays, right now, but normally in sound sessions, the didgeridoo is played over people, so you can really get that penetrating effect. As with most instruments, there was a practical use. When 40,000 years ago, they made it had a practical use as well, and that was communication. A lot of the syncopated rhythms and things, you could actually communicate to people on the next mountaintop about when you're going to come home or what you hunted that day or anything. So it was also used for communication when it was first made. Next slide, please. Let's shoot over to ancient Greece. And they have the aulos, which is a double flute that you blow into one place and the flutes kind of come out. A lyre, which I have the picture here. It's kind of like a harp instrument. Lots of different tunings for them, but they are a very pleasing and easy instrument, very accessible to play. Even if you're kind of trancing out yourself, you can continue to play it. And the kithara, which is a lute type instrument, kind of like, think of a guitar, kind of like the first guitar. And the Greeks used these instruments for digestion, for mental disturbance, for sleep disorders, to help aid in those things. Aristotle, in his famous work, The Anima, wrote that flute music could arouse strong emotions and even purify the soul. So I think they're on to something there. Next slide, please. So let's go over to ancient Egypt. The Egyptians were using incantations to heal, chants. So the voice, this is an instrument that every single person carries around with them no matter what. It is profound in the ways it can do. And the Egyptians, they practiced vocal toning, which is a use of vowel sounds manipulated using the breath and the voice in an attempt to restore people to their proper harmonic patterns. There are so many. The interesting thing about this is before I start every sound session, I have a toning practice that I do for the group. And there are probably 1,000 different ways to do it, but it's across all cultures, right? Hindus had, it was so, the Middle East had toning, obviously, Egypt, up in the Norse countries, they did as well. Probably just across cultures, and it's really cool when something like that happens, and cultures that never spoke to each other were doing the same thing around the same time. It's like, wow, I wonder who told them about that, So to the Egyptians, using the toning was so important that they would build these resonating chambers to help work the actual tones themselves and the harmonies and everything, and to just amplify it into an even grander experience. Next slide, please. And so the King's Chamber in the Pyramid of Giza is actually theorized that this was one of those chambers. There is a sarcophagus-looking thing in the chamber, but no one actually knows what that's for. So Stuart Reed is an acoustic physicist, and he studied the chambers back in 1997. One of only 2 people that stepped foot in the chamber with recording equipment. And he states that during the recording of the tests and all of the controls and the experiments, his chronic back pain that he had his whole life was healed. Just being in there with it. Now, obviously, they're a little strict on going back in there. I mean, you really probably couldn't even study it now if you wanted to. So can we reproduce that experiment? Probably not. But for him, it was real. And toning is very powerful practice. I think I just wanted to kind of give everybody in this moment, just like to tone into the heart a little bit, just to give you like an example of what a tone feels like. And so the tone for the heart and the practice that I use is the tone ah, like ma or pa. And all you're going to do is you'll take a deep breath in, and you let that come out gently on your exhale. Whatever note comes out is perfect. So you take a deep breath in, let it come out. Putting that in the heart here. Let's do one more of those. Centering down into the heart. And so there are actual tones that go with each part of your body, with the chakras in some belief systems, and it's really just all about bringing it and centering you down into your main channel here. So moving away from Egypt, next slide please, let's jump over to ancient China. This is where we see the gong come into play. Back in the 6th century was the first one ever made. When it was made, used ceremonially and for healing rituals, also practically for announcements, maybe milestones. It was so magical to people when they first figured out how to make them that it was believed they had to be assisted by higher powers to even successfully make a gong that has a ringing ability. Which, you know, back in the 6th century, if someone brought a gong out, you may be thinking that that was magic and supernaturally inspired. I don't know. They sound pretty out of this world if you've never heard them before, which you will today if you haven't. Next slide, please. So science is finally catching up to what the ancients have known for millennia. Next slide. That sound can heal. So let's take a moment and move into the actual science, the point of this talk. Next slide, please. And as I said, I probably could have done a 2-hour talk on the things that aren't science or some of the magical things that I've seen. But when I started digging deep into the science, it's really amazing all the ways that this all kind of fits together. And it really ignited more curiosity in me to explore things from this scientific side. Next slide. I think it's important to start off with what is sound? Just what is it? Scientific textbook definition. Sound is a traveling wave which is an oscillation of pressure transmitted through a solid, liquid, or gas, composed of frequencies within the range of hearing and of a level sufficiently strong enough to be heard. Sound is measured in hertz. 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. In the human brain and the human body, we can hear from 20 hertz all the way to 20,000 hertz. Above 20,000 is ultrasonic. Think of like a dog whistle, something you just can't even hear but you know is there. Below 20 is infrasonic. Think elephants, cows, bison. They make these super deep sounds that we can't even register just to communicate with each other. That was really neat. I didn't know that. So speaking of the science, next slide please. There aren't that many studies about sound and sound healing and how it heals and all the different ways that it affects humans. But I wanted to list a few here and talk about them. There actually are a couple right now being done, but they are not finished, so I don't want to put them in here. In 2017, the Journal of Evidence-Based Alternative Medicine, people were questioned before and after a 1-hour sound bath experience. In the questionnaire, the 4 biggest things that people felt were alleviated: tension, pain, anger, and confusion. That last one was interesting. I've never come out of a session and been like, does everyone feel less confused? But I guess for this one that was on the sheet, and enough people answered it that it actually made it into the results of the experiment. In 2015, the Journal of Pain Research and Management, low frequency vibration for 5 weeks, they found that improved sleep and decreased the pain for 19 fibromyalgia patients. Something we're saying, there was 100 people in the study, so it wasn't a giant proportion of people. And also low frequency vibration was administered. They were basically laying on a bed that was a speaker. And then they pumped through these incredibly deep tones, basically giving them a full body massage with sound. And so for 19 of them, there was a decrease in the pain, which, I imagine a full body massage would help with that, right? In 2005, the University of Rochester, they showed that singing and drumming specifically, those two, assisted in relaxation. Singing and drumming are interesting, and now I'm about to really get into a deep conversation about like what they're doing each individually. But it's interesting that back before the knowledge was so prevalent as it is today, they were able to see that, well, singing and drumming are both moving into relaxation. And anecdotally, I found a study in Germany that said gentle sound therapy helped with tinnitus. So here's a good example of how it works for some people and doesn't work for others. I have tinnitus. I've had tinnitus for the better part of a decade, part of the riding around in vans and playing in those bands that Susan was talking about for all those years. And I've probably played in front of these instruments thousands of times, maybe. I still have tinnitus, That said, it's not getting any worse, so maybe there is some things happening to that end. But once again, that's why I just wanted to say anecdotally, because the study itself was a little, and in my personal experience, it doesn't help that. But you may be different, and that's the cool thing about it. Next slide, please. So let's get into talking about brain waves. So there are two ways that sound healing affects the body, not directly, but like kind of puts the body into these specific states. And so this doesn't really have anything to do with the sound hitting you as much as it does just being in the presence and being held by the sounds. Because this is part of the innate thing that I was talking about earlier. So brain waves. These are synchronized electrical pulses from masses of neurons communicating with each other all across the brain. And they happen in like a frequency, right? So I like to imagine almost like you're in a stadium and you see the wave happening, right? Across the stadium, you see the wave happening. And so it goes all the way around and it comes back. Well, that was one, right? And so in the brain, the electrical currents are also doing that. It's like it'll ripple across the whole brain, and that will be one. And so there are different levels and different states. There's 5 main states. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about those. Let's start with gamma. Gamma is heightened perception. This is learning, critical thinking. Some people drink a lot of coffee in the morning and they are just going, right? A lot of coffee. There are nootropics, which are like things you can take to kind of help your brain be on its firing on all cylinders. All of this is meant to get you up into this gamma state, which is 32 to 100 hertz and is actually with heightened perception. But most people are not hanging out in this state very long. Right now, most people listening to this are going to be in Theta. And this is normal waking consciousness. you're thinking, you still have the ability to get excited, but you are just homeostasis, 13 to 32 hertz. Your brain is just easy, right? Alpha is one step below the beta. And so a good example of this is if you ever finished a task, I had a thing to do, I'm done, now I'm done packing up everything, I'm done with everything, I'm just going to go sit for a little bit. You have this little sense of accomplishment, you're kind of relaxed, that thing you were worried about is over. This is alpha. This is from 8 hertz to 13 hertz within your brain. Very much just relaxation, right? So if we take another step down, there is a thin 4 hertz range from 4 hertz to 8 hertz called theta. I'm going to go into this more detailed in a second, but this is where a lot of the magic happens from this place. Creativity, insight, deep mental states. When you're deeply meditating, you're in theta. When you reduced consciousness, so in meditation, if you ever do take that step back into the observer, this is in theta. Also, REM sleep is in theta. It's this incredible part that a lot of these practices and modalities are actually trying to get you to, because it's so powerful. And it's just a very thin, because right after theta, it drops down into delta, and delta is deep, dreamless sleep. Like you are just relaxed. I've had nights where you lay down, you close your eyes, and you wake up 8 hours later and it doesn't feel like you've moved. There's a lot of delta in that sleep. So the theta is a very thin place that you're hitting between alpha and delta. Next slide, please. And so that means that it's between relaxation and deep sleep. And it's from this place, the theta brain state, that the mind can direct the body to restore and heal itself. The subconscious connection is a lot stronger, and the ability to program better behaviors comes online. So not only can you start that regenerative process, but you can also start working with some mental things like, I probably shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Or, man, I could do better. And all of this is accessed from the theta state. A practical way to kind of put an example out there, if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, if you've ever been driving in a car, and you've got in your car, and all of a sudden you just showed up where you were driving, and you don't quite remember the trip. Sounds dangerous, but it's happened to me before. You were in theta during that trip. Paying attention, but not paying attention, being somewhere else, but still being here. That's why it's such a great place to be. It's so sought after. And oddly enough, in sound sessions as well, a lot of people will be laying there and say, wow, that, it's been an hour and a half, but that felt like 15 minutes. Once again, that's a good thing. It's like, wow, okay, they're able to get down into theta. So as far as the brain is concerned, let's keep thinking about theta. Next slide, please. And let's move down into the body a little bit, to the nervous system, right? The parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And before we talk about those, let's just define the nervous system. Next slide, please. It's a highly complex part of an animal that coordinates its actions and sensory information by transmitting signals to and from different parts of the body. Pain, pleasure, it regulates so many things. The vagal nerve that comes down here connects all of your organ systems. It is just an incredibly complex system, and one that we need every day. And as you'll see, it serves us in so many different ways. And so the nervous system can be broken down into 2 separate sides. And so we'll start with the sympathetic. Next slide, please. The sympathetic nervous system, I'm sure everyone's heard of fight or flight, right? Fight or flight. Or freeze. Maybe you've seen those little goats that if you scare them, they tense up and fall over. That's actually like an evolutionary advantage that they evolved into, which is interesting. But for fight or flight, when you get into that state, you're ready to stand up or you're ready to get out of there, your blood pressure naturally goes up. Blood moves away from the core into your extremities in case you got to get out of there. Stress hormones kick up cortisol, epinephrine. Also, the glucose rapidly released into the muscles, so in case you need that burst of energy, you are ready to go. And you can imagine, this is probably like, you are like ready for something to happen. Probably not a sustainable way to live your life. And that's why on the other side of that, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. Next slide, please. And so with the parasympathetic, it's the rest and the digest. Now this is heart rate and respiration slow. Blood pressure drops. The blood heads back to the digestive system, back to the core. Acetylcholine is released to regulate the muscle contractions and help with the digestion and everything. Stress hormones are decreased. This is the place that is conducive to healing, not the sympathetic, right? The thing is, you can't be both. So as with most things in life, next slide please, it's all about balance between the two. So if you think about early humans, next slide please, there was a natural balance kind of built in to their life. If they went out on a very intense hunt, chasing the animal for 3 days, they finally got it, and they're coming back with it. They get done, they consume the animal, and they probably have a day, maybe more, of just relaxing, letting their body reset from that intense moment that was the hunt. And it just naturally kind of happened that way. And so they probably didn't have a lot of the stress-based issues that we do today, because as I'm sure all of you know, we don't have that luxury today. Next slide, please. Our lives are full of distractions and busyness. I know mine is. Pretty sure yours is too. Worry about money, challenging relationships, stressful job, being tethered to the cell phone. That's a big one. Constantly looking at screens and LED lights flickering so fast that our unconscious can't keep up. Digital phones changing the nuance of our voices so we can't even pick that up anymore. And even large speakers producing unphysical sound patterns in a space. I'm really glad that everyone's able to hear at a big concert, but that's not a natural sound happening, So even that can be somewhat stressful, even though we love it at a concert. Wow, we really want to feel the music, but even that can create stress in our life and in our body. Next slide, please. So knowing what we know now, that brain waves control the mind, and the nervous system controls the body, and there are ideal states in both of those to get to that are conducive to healing. So we're going to put all that together and show that sound healing supports both the parasympathetic nervous system and getting you into the theta state. So now you're in the theta state, and your brain's telling your body to start regenerating, start healing, right? Start the process. Your body is in parasympathetic. It's ready to rest and digest and listen to everything your brain has to say and just get you into this place of regenerative healing via the sound. Next slide, please. Also talking about, we're talking about sound and vibration. So it's important to know that we are vibration. In fact, everything is vibration. Everything is vibration that you can think of. All the way from light to the ground you're standing on to you. It's all vibration. Next slide, please. And it happens in, varying kind of stands, as we're moving down through. This is a vibration, this wave. Hello, how you doing? This is also a vibration, the movement of our fingers, right? A smaller vibration than the wave. Keep moving it down into our breath. Our breath is a vibration. Keep moving down our heartbeat, getting a little faster, a little faster. Now into the muscular tremors. We're talking 0.03 seconds for that to happen. Eye movements, 0.01 seconds. Your vocal cords opening and closing as you're making noise, as I'm speaking to you right now. 10 to the negative 3 seconds for your vocal cords to open and close once. Moving down even further, now we're into sound localization. proprioception, 10 to the negative 4 seconds for that to happen. And we can take this all the way down to our atomic and quantum world, which is everything that we are experiencing currently. 10 to the negative 11 seconds for an atom to vibrate once. You know? So everything we know is vibration, from the biggest to the smallest. Even the earth circling the sun is a vibration. Next slide, please. So, what is physically happening? Because we talked about how the sound can hold space for you and can drop you into these deeper states and the parasympathetic nervous system. But then there's also direct physical effects that sound has on your body. There's two main ones. Next slide, please. Recalibrate of spatial localization. So rattles do this, rain sticks, chimes, kalimbas. These are all things that can move, and as they are moving, even if you're laying there not thinking about anything, your subconscious is going to be tracking that across the room, especially like a rattle or something, where you know a rattle from here sounds different than a rattle from down here. And as you're experiencing this and your subconscious is tracking it, your brain is quietly reprogramming your ability to do that. It's increasing your ability for spatial awareness. As I mentioned, this happened naturally. Remember, in the beginning of the talk, we were talking about, that the humans had this soundscape because they were always outside. You know, they weren't in rooms, they weren't in front of a computer, they weren't controlling everything about their audio field. They were just kind of existing and just out in nature. And because of that, they would hear the bird fly overhead. They would hear the leaves. They were able to see things almost and hear things in 3D. And so this part of their brain was always incredibly recalibrated. For us, we don't live outside so much. There is a benefit to having this recalibration. If not for any other reason, then like any other muscle, if you exercise it enough, then it's going to be there for you when you need it. So that's the first way that sound directly affects your body. The second way, next slide please, has to do with standing waves in your sensory neurons that are all over your body. Okay, so standing waves are enduring single frequency notes that have harmonics and overtones. They are the simplest pattern in space, just like literally like a wave in space. And they hold that, and that's really like all they do. So the gong, the crystal bowls, the metal Tibetan bowls, can all create these standing waves. And once it's being created, it can provide the entire body with simultaneous, consistent, and coherent stimulation. And as your whole body is being stimulated and you're being kind of met with this sound, and sometimes like a standing wave may just be something like, you're just being met there with that and you're laying there experiencing it. All the sensory neurons throughout your whole body, they begin to fire in synchrony. So it's like instead of all kind of happening like whenever they want or whenever they needed to, it all begins to fire at once, as you're moving through. To the millisecond, they're all firing together. And a lot of times, if you have experienced sound healing, or you know anyone that has, or I'm just going to tell you that a lot of the clients that I've seen, when they leave the experience, they will language it as, I feel tuned up. I feel in harmony, right? And I'm not a scientist, but I believe that it's this action is what they're feeling and how they're languaging it. I feel tuned up. Yes, you feel tuned up because all of your neurons are firing in tune with each other, right? So I thought that was just an incredible way that the sound actually has an effect on the body. And it actually changed the way that I do my sessions, and that I work a lot more with the standing wave portion because I feel like that just has a more profound effect as you're walking away, in my personal experience that I found. Next slide, please. So I did want to mention the didgeridoo and the shofar. These are blown instruments that have a drone. The shofar is the gigantic horn instrument. It literally is it's a horn of an animal, kind of curled over. I believe a bunch of them were used to bring down a wall back in the day or something like that. But these sounds are a lot less pure, but they also come embedded naturally with vibrations from the performer's abdomen. So any intentions that they're doing, as well as just the deeply penetrating nature of the didgeridoo, can also create standing wave and have that same kind of effect for almost everyone that's experiencing it deeply, deep and close. So I just wanted to mention that on the side there. Next slide, please. And so as we move out of the science, I wanted to talk a little bit about the two prevailing theories as I've seen them in the sound work. I'm making up these words. We'll call the two prevailing theories frequency, mystery. Okay. Next slide, please. So frequency is the belief that certain frequencies, regardless of how they are generated or experienced, are subscribed to the healing of very specific parts of the body and of the mind. Maybe you've heard of solfeggio. Maybe you've heard of certain frequencies like 528 being having to do with manifesting love and abundance, or 111 hertz curing cancer. This is kind of what I'm talking about as so specific. Like, it doesn't matter what the 528 sounds like. If it's 528, it's going to manifest love. Solfeggio, as I dug into it a little deeper, there are actually a couple of different beliefs of what the tones actually are in the solfeggio scale. Not a lot of it is based on science, so that I couldn't find, because I tried to dive into it for this talk. It's a lot more of it is just kind of, a lot of people say it's pseudoscience. I happen to believe a lot of pseudoscience, so I'm not here to say whether it's true or not. People have built empires off of specific frequencies and that whole concept. But even so much as like the chakras, which we mentioned a little while ago, the bowls being like there being musical notes subscribed to each one of those, of a scale that was designed far after chakras were initially, brought into the awareness of humans. So there's just a lot of things that don't quite add up there. But all that said, binaural beats, I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of that, binaural beats. This is brain state entrainment. So we were just talking about this brain state. So binaural beats, the way that works is, and I've used this and I find benefit from it, is they play slightly different tones in each ear. So you wear headphones and it's just a little bit. And so it creates within the two, which is, your head, it creates this different tone. That's like a mixture of the two working against and with each other. And it's that tone that they say will bring your brain state from beta into alpha and down even into theta. Of course, I can't speak to that, like, is that exactly what's happening? All I can say is I did have a very relaxed experience after using the binaural beats, even though it's frequency based. But even then, some of the binaural beats that action will be taking place, but then they'll say, and this is tuned to 528 to help you with love or whatever. So I wanted to mention this to everyone because I'm sure there are some people that have experienced sound healing this way, maybe that are watching this. And I just think it's really cool that, all these different ways of doing the same thing can exist. So moving down to what I would say is the other prevailing theory, next slide please, is what I call mystery. And this is a little more just based in my experiences, but it's more that any frequency at any time can help any person in a variety of ways. This belief involves a little more trust, which a little more trust involves a little more surrender, and a little more surrender involves a little more vulnerability. It isn't that interesting to think about because in order to be in theta, you have to be somewhat vulnerable. You are down, not in your waking state. In order to be in the parasympathetic nervous system, that's the nature of it. You are relaxed. You can be vulnerable. So this vulnerability in both of those states is actually reflected. In my own studies, I did some experiments when I first got the bowls, saying like, oh, I hit this bowl and hold it here where it's supposed to be. This is where it's supposed to be. The C is down here at the root. But then I would hold it up here at the heart and hit it. And some days I would feel it stronger elsewhere other than where it was supposed to be. And some days it would be right where it was supposed to be, and the next day it could be totally different. And so it really kind of put me in the mindset of like, there are no hard and fast rules. Now, does that mean that, 528, you might listen to that and walk out and meet the love of your life right on the stoop there? Totally. Could happen. Like, that's what I'm saying is that it's a little more, it could also not happen, and that's okay. It's a little more of being open to it all and not having the expectations. It's served me a little better moving into this modality, and trying to respect everybody's beliefs while doing so. So, that concludes the spoken and talk part, and we're going to take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, I will move into the actual demonstration part. And as Susan mentioned, if you want to get into a more comfortable place, maybe put some headphones on if you have them. Even earbuds will help kind of really for you to experience it the best way that I can record them here. So I want to thank you all so much, and we'll see you shortly. So hello everyone, and welcome back to the second part of the talk, which is actually a lot less talking and more experiential. I'm going to give each of these instruments about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to speak about each of them before we get started. And like Susan was saying, maybe you're going to want to put some headphones on. Maybe you're going to want to lay down, get in a comfortable position for this. I won't be able to do them each as long as I normally do, but just to give you an idea and kind of moving forward, maybe we'll see you at a sound session. So the first instrument I'm going to talk about are the Himalayan singing bowls. Not the flute, but the Himalayan singing bowls. There's no cohesive origin story. There are many different beliefs about where they originated from, as early as the 50s and 60s, and also as late as 6,000 years ago, meaning that maybe the Sumerians were the ones that taught the Himalayan people this process and how to do this. The bowls themselves are all hand-hammered. Not all of them are, but these are. And these bowls actually are from 1971, the paperwork that I have from them. And if you can notice, maybe you can see all of the irregular divots and dents. It's because each of these is hammered, and with each hammer, a prayer is supposed to be set into it. And it takes about 10,000 hammer strikes to make a bowl. So each bowl is full with 10,000 prayers. And then, add 7 to 10 bowls, and you can get played all together, something a little like this. Okay. Moving on now to the flute. Next slide, please. The first flutes were made out of bone, and they were found about 60,000 years ago. For the first cultures that created them, they had a meaning of fertility, also related to birth and death. As mentioned, Aristotle was saying that they could stir the soul and purify. This flute that I have is a Native American style. A friend of mine, actually named Sparky, made this flute. He's no longer with us. I miss him a lot. But the story of this flute is the top part, if you can see it, is one color, that's cedar. And the bottom part is black walnut. And what happened was the black walnut tree fell in his yard and hit the cedar tree, and both trees came down, and so he took a piece from each and made this flute. And I've had it now for about 10 years, and I treasure it a lot. So I'll play some of this for you as well in a few minutes. So that was the flute. Heading on now. Next slide, please. Over to the gong. As I mentioned earlier, 6th century AD. You'll notice a lot of the same irregularities. All because it's hammered, a lot like the bowls. And Pisces, a German company. I love them a lot. Originally, they were from China, and then they spread from there. It's not so much about hitting the gong really loud as about what you're about to hear is really going to be, it's really about coaxing the sound of the gong out of it, not about hitting it and expecting it. And so it's really this gentle play between the gong and the player As well as there are a lot of different mallets to use, which I'll use a couple different ones, as well as regular mallets. And like we were talking about, you're going to experience a standing wave right now. A little different when you're in the room with it, but it'll give you an idea through your headphones. So I'll give you a few minutes of that. So everyone's able to. And lastly, we'll talk about the didgeridoo. The last slide, please. Or the yadaki, as it's called traditionally. Also, incredibly old instrument, 40,000 years old, like we talked about earlier. The noise you make into the didgeridoo to make its noise is a raspberry sound, like, doesn't sound so healing right then, does it? The pressure from that reflects off all of the irregularities inside the tube, creates back pressure, and allows for the didgeridoo to make its tone. If you play the didgeridoo, I actually know people that have cured their sleep apnea because of the workout you give your throat. It kind of tightens everything up. So just a good way, if you have sleep apnea, pick up a didgeridoo and start learning it. It took me 3 months to make a proper sound, and then another 2 months to circular breathe. Which circular breathing is the ability to play constantly, and if you watch me, as I'm playing the didgeridoo, I'll do this, and that means I'm taking a breath right then. But you'll never hear the didgeridoo stop. So that's kind of the healing part of it, and the constant standing wave and the penetrating nature of it. So I will give you a few minutes of this as well. The sound is a little more intense. So that concludes the demonstration part of my talk, and really concludes the talk totally. I'd like to express a lot of gratitude to Spiritual Frontier Fellowship for having me out, Susan, inviting me, and just thank you all so much for tuning in. And I'm going to bring Susan back up to do the rest of the announcements, and then I believe we're going to have a quick. So thank you all so much.
Well, what an experience. Thank you so much, Garth. That was incredible. Luckily, I got to be here in person, and I will probably be calling you for a full session at some point in time. So thank you for that. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and being present here. We hope to see you next month. Marcia Moon Hebrank will be here again on December 3rd. And please visit our website and social media pages to stay tuned to who's coming up. Again, we have room on our board of directors for volunteers who want to participate and contribute to us. We'd really appreciate the help. But throughout the next few months, I want to leave you with this. Try to remember to live in faith, not fear, and to count your blessings every day. That's going to be so important the next few months.